Over the past 25 years, between Toy Biz and Hasbro, there have been literally hundreds and hundreds of Marvel Legends that were designed, prototyped, sculpted, painted, put into production, and eventually delivered to toy store shelves. But then I ask you, what happened to all the action figures that were designed, conceptualized, revealed to the public, but never quite made it to retail? That is what we're going to be talking about today. Because I'm David, you're watching Displaying Model Behavior, and this is a comprehensive list of every Marvel Legend that was revealed, but never made it to toy store shelves. Before we get started, I want to say a big thank you to channel member Joey B, who gave me all this information and taught me through it as well. Can of Coke to you, brother. This video's for you. So anyone who knows me knows that I am a stickler for details, and because of that, we're not just going to talk about the action figures that never made it. We're going to talk about the ones that eventually did arrive on store shelves, but not in the form that they were originally revealed. First up, we've got Toy Biz Mr. Fantastic, who to this day still stands as one of the best examples of what you can do with a Mr. Fantastic action figure. No salad tong fingers over here, full-on morphing parts and pieces. The huge big hand, the hammer, such a great job done. But what we got was not what was originally revealed, because the first Mr. Fantastic image had a really stylized John Byrne type of face that was totally tailored and geared towards recreating the comic book art. And then for whatever reason, the one that finally made it to retail didn't look like that, which is a real shame because the one that we finally got was a much more boring, basic Reed Richards face. Whereas even though I will confess the picture is a little pixely, the John Byrne looking Mr. Fantastic was way more interesting and would have made a much more fun action figure. Then we have the Galactus Wave first appearance Hulk. So the Grey Hulk, and what a wave this was. Really demonstrating what Toy Biz were going to be going for with their Marvel Legends line. That Galactus Builder figure, it's tough to top that. And they didn't for a long, long time because that was iconic. And the Grey Hulk, he had a few changes on his route to the toy store shelf. When we first saw him, he came with a really fun looking diorama piece that had the fire hydrant, the water spurting out. And that was something that Toy Biz really set themselves apart with when they first began, was the nice diorama pieces. So it's funny that when he eventually hit store shelves, it was nowhere to be seen. And not only that, but he had a different head sculpt as well. So gone was the angry Hulk head, and instead we had a Hulk head, which kind of set the standard going forward for a lot of Marvel Legends where you'd look at them and go, why the bored face? Now we've got Mystique, who only had a couple of alterations, but like I said, we're going to be going deep with these, so I hope you've boiled the kettle, made a nice cup of tea, and got comfortable, because we're going to be here for a while. Mystique was on a different body when she was originally revealed. Originally, she had the Black Widow body, which was a pretty good one to use for a basic female character. But when she eventually made it to retail, she was on the Scarlet Witch body. This is only a small detail, but Joey, who put this list together for me, he don't miss out on nothing. And also, Mystique had some tailoring alterations as well. When she was finally put into production, her skirt piece was shorter than in the original picture. Yeah, that's how deep we're going here. Before he had his own dedicated TV show on Disney Plus, Wonder Man was getting the Toy Biz treatment. But what we got wasn't what we were originally shown. The first image of Wonder Man had a very different looking head sculpt, and for whatever reason, they decided not to put that one into production. Instead, they gave it a few tweaks before releasing it to the public. And not only that, but the full-on paint job was totally revised as well, as you can see with the different pictures here. And also, there is some debate that maybe the torso has a different sculpt as well, although with these old images, it can be a little bit difficult to tell. In that same wave with Wonder Man, we had the Riders Scarlet Witch, and this is a classic bad Marvel Legend. But it wasn't always. The original face sculpt that was shown in these photos here looked so much better than what we eventually got. I don't know if it was a case of the sculpt being redone or if it was simply a matter of the figure going into production and whatever the methods at the factory were, they didn't recreate it the way that it was envisioned. Also, even though the cuts on the body with the articulation look exactly the same, it seems that in the original picture, it is a different body that she was on, because the one that we finally got looked very different to this. So this Ultron that we're looking at over here is still from that same wave as Wonder Man and Scarlet Witch. One of the riders, so he comes with the glider accessory. A real nice little set, but it's not what we were originally shown. So the one that we got had the same body and build, but his head had what would come to be known as the bunny rabbit Ultron head, where he's got the antenna, ears, and a bit more of a toothy looking mouth, whereas the original one had a head sculpt that harkened much more to his appearance in Marvel Ultimate Alliance. There might be some comic book reference for that as well, but I'm not entirely sure. I mean, Ultron changes his look as often as I change my socks. Once every other month. So there's probably a precedent, but I know that Ultimate Alliance was probably quite prominent at this time in the early 2000s. So it would make sense that they would hearken towards this design, and it's still a bit of a head scratcher that they didn't stick with it. This one's quite interesting here. Way back before I was complaining about the Marvel Legends Age of Apocalypse Weapon X doing the character dirty, 20 years previous to that, the Marvel Legends Age of Apocalypse Weapon X did the character dirty. In this case, the previewed figure was completely different to the one that we actually got. The final AOA Weapon X was a solid black in his color scheme, whereas the original one was on a totally different body that incorporated black and blue into the design. Honestly, I think it made it look much more interesting, but he never made it to production. The one that we finally got, though, did have a fun chase alternate where he had the burnt up Freddy Krueger head sculpt. I kind of like that. But it's interesting that what did actually hit store shelves was quite a downgrade to what was originally revealed. Also, speaking of the Age of Apocalypse, there was Toy Biz Age of Apocalypse Sabretooth, and originally he was going to come with a Wild Child pack-in accessory. Would have made for a real nice set with the two of them. I mean, they were pretty much joined at the hip in the Age of Apocalypse, so if you got one, you really do have to have the other. At least Hasbro knew that with their Age of Apocalypse line. First of all, giving us Wild Child, and then finally giving us an amazing Age of Apocalypse Victor Creed Sabretooth. And this old school Toy Biz one with the slightly more gruesome looking face, I think it looked really cool. Those two together, that would have been a fantastic set. And it's a shame it never happened. From the same wave as Age of Apocalypse Weapon X, we got Captain Britain. And while his sculpt is exactly the same as what was revealed, his costume totally different. They decided for whatever reason to go for a complete alternate paint job, which still looked nice at the time, but it's a shame that the one that was originally revealed is one that to this day we've still never had in action figure form. One more for this Giant Man wave. We have this alternate chase version of Havoc, which I'm pretty sure is based on the early 2000s X-Men run. It's an unusual, unique kind of look for Alex Summers, but was cancelled very quickly. With a lot of these changes that are made, sometimes the character design still makes it to the box artwork. In this instance, he only exists in this one picture, unless you can find another one. And if you can, then that's quite impressive, because I certainly couldn't. With the Toy Biz Apocalypse wave, we got a chase version of Bishop that came with the bald head, but that original bald head Bishop was supposed to look much more like his Age of Apocalypse counterpart, where the bald head actually comes from. So it's a shame that they didn't lean more into that. Instead, he's got his more regular X-Men type of attire, just with a slightly different paint job and no bandana. So it's kind of an Age of Apocalypse Bishop, but not fully committing, but still qualifies as a chase figure. What's interesting, though, is that the original design of the Age of Apocalypse Bald Bishop still features on the package artwork. I guess they decided to make the change so late into the game that the packaging was already good to go, and they weren't going to change it. Now we have a whole set of figures that never were. These four here were apparently part of a Toy Biz fan poll that I guess they all lost because none of them happened. So we had the ultimate versions of Captain America, Magneto, and Cyclops, plus an astonishing Wolverine as well. Eventually, we would get some versions of these characters further down the line, but for whatever reason, this little selection that was put to one side for what might have been a fan vote or something else, well, none of them got made. But then again, they were all just repaints of existing figures anyway, so it's not like it cost Toy Biz anything to do it. The Onslaught Build-A-Figure wave went through quite a few changes before at last being finalized. Originally, it was going to be the first Bring on the Bad Guys wave, and it had one heck of an interesting looking roster. Rather than having one big Build-A-Figure that you could make, each individual character was going to come with their own Army Builder counterpart. It's kind of funny that there wasn't a lot of correlation between the character that you would buy and the Army Builder they would come with. So we had unusual combinations like Lady Deathstrike with a hand ninja, Loki with a Hydra agent, or Abomination with a Skrull. So there's no real connective tissue storyline-wise. I know maybe Lady Deathstrike might have worked with the hand at some point, but you know what I mean. It's not obvious. Similarly, Green Goblin would have come with an AIM agent, Blackheart would have got a Brood drone, and then finally Pyro would have got a Hellfire goon. So at least there is some X-Men connectivity there. But it's a real interesting concept for a wave that we just never saw. We were supposed to get Crimson Dynamo in this wave as well, although he was dropped from the lineup. However, they did later include that design as part of the 2010 Iron Man 2 wave. There's a rumor, and I choose to believe it because it's a fun one, that the Brood and Skrull sculpts were eventually used by Diamond Select for their own figures, because at the time, Diamond Select was a subsidiary of Toy Biz, so why not use what you've already made? Ultimately, I can see how they would have abandoned this approach because it's not really great for army building. If you want to army build a whole bunch of AIM agents, you're going to end up with a whole ton of random green goblins. So yeah, I think the eventual delivery method for the army builders, where they would be Pulse exclusives or whatever, it's not perfect, but it's certainly a better method. Not necessarily part of the Bring on the Bad Guys wave, but we had prototypes of Throg, the Frog of Thunder, and also Forbrush Man, who is a character that, while making this video in 2026, I have no idea who Forbrush Man is, but he actually warranted a Marvel Legend, or at least the idea of a Marvel Legend back in the early 2000s. I'm gonna have to hop on the wiki because I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, yep, I got nothing. Now we've got the Mojo Build-A-Figure wave, which holds its own little mysteries, one of which would have been perfect for that Build-A-Figure. Originally, each individual character was going to come with an X-Baby accessory pack-in. For a Mojo Build-A-Figure wave, that is some perfect synergy there, and it's a genuine shame that they didn't move forward with that idea. Also for this wave, we were originally going to be getting first appearance Daredevil. Ketchup and Mustard Daredevil was going to be debuted in this one, but for whatever reasons, he was pulled from the lineup and replaced with first appearance Iron Man. So I guess they wanted to have a first appearance someone, and for whatever reason, it was Iron Man who eventually made the cut. Now we have three figures that are pretty much legendary in the community as the ultimate collectible pieces, because these actually were made, but in very small number. First of all, there is Blue Costume Wasp, just a repaint, but a very rare one. And then we have Silver Shirt Luke Cage, Disco Luke Cage, another one that did make it to toy shelves, but in a very small number. And finally, we have Crimson Dawn Psylocke, who is the same Psylocke that we all know and love, but she's got the red Crimson Dawn tattoo down the side of her face, which is something that I would still like to see to this day. I love me some Crimson Dawn Psylocke. That's my comic book reading era. So each of these got maybe about 7 figures that were actually put into production. I don't know if they ever made it to toy store shelves. Probably not. They were just samples or whatever, but they do exist. And if you own any one of them, you can probably retire on it. One character who suffered a bit of a downgrade in the Galactus wave was Professor X, originally pictured with his lovely Shi'ar hover chair. Well, no, not for you, Chuck. Guess what? The X-Men movies are still in theaters, and at the time, he was wheeling around in an old-school analog wheelchair. So guess what? That's what the action figure's going to be coming with. Marvel Legends fans would have to wait quite a while before Xavier got the hover chair upgrade. In the meantime, the action figure was going to be getting an arm workout. This is a weird mime. I'm going to stop doing that. It's fascinating to find out about what different ideas Toy Biz and later Hasbro would have for extending the life cycle of their various figures. There was going to be a best of wave, which was going to be made of repaints of previous figures from series 6 and 7. We can see some examples of the repaints, but the best of concept was something that was never put into action. One example from this best of wave that did manage to get into a few people's hands was the Silver Juggernaut. I think there is a YouTuber out there who has some footage of him. I'm going to see if I can find it. If I can do, you'll know because you're looking at it now. And if I have, then kudos to that person who managed to get one in hand. While Toy Biz was finding their groove with the Marvel Legends line, they were also doing different Marvel-related action figures as well. We had the X-Men Classics line, and in that, there is an Iceman who was revealed to the world, but we never actually got. This isn't a huge loss though, because this version of Iceman is pretty much just a repaint of the Iceman that we got from Marvel Legends Series 8. So we still got him, but not in quite the same form. Also, in this X-Men Classics line, we got a phasing Phoenix, which was a translucent version of the Marvel Legends Phoenix that we had previously had. Now, this one, a bit like Crimson Dawn, Psylocke, and a few others, does exist in physical form. It was made, it became manifest, but very few people have it. And I have a sneaking suspicion that the same YouTuber who has the Silver Juggernaut has this Phoenix as well. So when I track you down, mysterious YouTuber, I'm going to give you some kudos, because it seems like you have a pretty impressive X-Men collection. There's also another version of Psylocke. This one is not highly sought after though, because it was never ultimately made. But we did have a prototype that had more purple going on with the hair, and also the body that she was on was the Black Widow body, which is different from the one that we eventually got. Now we're going to take a trip over to a line of characters that have never really been covered by Marvel Legends, I don't think. It's the Micronauts. We have some concept art, and we have a very good-looking, big, chunky monster figure. So first of all, we've got the concept art for Bug, which looks like it would have made a fun action figure, but hey, I guess we'll never know. But then we did have a prototype made for the Dire Wraith. I'm not a Micronauts reader, I'm not familiar with these guys, but this Dire Wraith big blobby dude, oh, he would have looked like a whole lot of fun. Maybe one day we might get a deluxe figure from Hasbro that looks like this. In the meantime though, he just exists on the Internet Archive. Sticking with concept art, we also have a look at an early version of Darkhawk. This one that we see in sketch form was never brought to fruition. Of course, we eventually did get a Darkhawk figure, and he was pretty good. But this OG concept, that one never happened. And if you want to grit your teeth over something that never happened but would have been so cool, there were concept designs for a huge building-sized absorbing man. I know a lot of classic Crusher Creel appearances have him as just his regular 6-foot whatever type of design, but there is a lot of precedent in the comic books for him growing to gigantic proportions, and a huge, towering, monstrous absorbing man. Oh, that would have been so badass. But you know what? Toy Biz lost the license, so this one never happened. Toy Biz were also playing around with a potential Odin Build-A-Figure, and we would eventually get an Odin Build-A-Figure from Hasbro, plus a beautiful deluxe one who actually looks very similar to the design of this figure. But this was another one of those Toy Biz ones that was probably quite close to happening, and then they lost the license, and the rest is history. Now, even though at this point in the timeline, Toy Biz have lost the Marvel license, that doesn't mean it's the end of their comic book action figures, because they then pivoted to legendary comic book heroes. And we got a whole line of figures that had the huge, big Pit Build-A-Figure. It was really cool, and they weren't originally going to stop there. There were 2 more waves that were planned, and we have a whole bunch of concept art for them. Of course, it is just the concept art, and if you have to get your binoculars out to see it, that means I'm not going to linger too long on it, but it's real interesting to clock some of the characters that they were going to include, a lot of which we still have never had in action figure form. There's a couple like the Rocketeer, for example, that different companies have picked up and made new versions of. But to think how deep into, not necessarily indie comics, but smaller comic book lines Toy Biz were willing to go, I think it's a real shame that these never eventually happened, because there would have been a few really fun action figures. Also, doing a Frost Giant Build-A-Figure, that would have been really fun as well. Just huge, big, hunky, chonking, bonking character. I was running out of descriptors there. But yeah, a Toy Biz Frost Giant, that would have been really cool too. But hey, what is this video if not lamenting over the things that we would never ultimately get? Toy Biz were also playing around with the idea of doing a Build-A-Vehicle wave. And that would have been kind of fun, mixing it up. Not just the great big monstrous characters, but some vehicles to ride around in. And we got at least one picture of a potential Build-A-Vehicle Quinjet. Never happened, but once again, it would have been kind of cool. We got some more concept art now for figures that never came anywhere near production. Or did they? First of all, there's a robot Wolverine. Yeah, I don't think this actually occurred in any way, shape, or form. It just exists in these black and white pencils. But then we've got these really gnarly, real-world looking designs for the Lizard and the Rhino. Now, even though we never got these guys in 1/12 scale, we did get a very similar looking Rhino in Hasbro's 3.75-inch line. So I can't help but feel that maybe there was some cross-pollination going on because the concept art and the eventual Hasbro figure do look very, very similar. Now we're into the age of Hasbro, and we're going to kick things off with a fan vote character, or a whole bunch of fan vote characters that never made it. There was a fan vote to kick things off that gave us Age of Apocalypse Sunfire, which actually is a beautiful figure, really stands the test of time, although of course when Hasbro upgraded it, mwah, absolutely gorgeous. But the figures that never made the cut, they're a pretty interesting bunch. First up, we had Aurora and North Star, so a little bit of Alpha Flight representation. North Star was on the bullseye body that they were using at the time. We would eventually get these characters along with a whole bunch of other Alpha Flight members. Hasbro did a good job of building out that team, and even in 2026, they're still adding members to it, but these two at the time, they didn't make the cut. Then we had Training Suit Gambit, also on the bullseye body, and of course now we have the entire Training Suit team. God bless you, Hasbro, for just giving us sets that gave us all the characters in one go. You love to see it, very convenient. But there was a chance of getting a Training Suit Gambit a lot sooner. Something that seems to be a theme with Magneto figures is long gangly limbs, because before we got the big monkey arm X-Men 97 Magneto, there was this potential Magneto, who I think also looks a little bit gangly bangly. Don't know what's up with that. Going cosmic, there was a lovely looking Lilandra. I thought for the time, this render or whatever it was, whatever we're looking at, looked like a really good representation. Luckily, she finally got her due in the Wolverine 2-pack. And another figure that looked very good for the time and was a very promising start for Hasbro, even if we didn't get it, was Silver Samurai. Although eventually we would get a very nice Silver Samurai who really did the character justice. So nice, we just got him again in the Gamerverse 2-pack. Although I will admit, that figure had a few little upgrades as well, so it wasn't a straight up re-release. And then finally, we have classic Costume Storm, who eventually would make it to store shelves in the Thunderbird, wasn't it? It was the Thunderbird 2-pack. That's where we would eventually get that figure, but it was quite a wait before we could finally add her to our giant-sized X-Men team. Now we've got a whole bunch of characters that were shown off at San Diego Comic-Con 2009 that were never put into production. And there are a few here that are real heartbreakers because, man, I would have loved to have seen them. Probably the biggest one, literally and figuratively, is Beast. This was going to be part of the Fang Foom wave way back in the day, apparently. And he looked great. Just the big chunky dude with stupid head on top of a head design. I mean, it's wacky and bonkers, but really fun and kind of a OG classic Hulk character. I'm genuinely surprised that we haven't seen this guy from Hasbro yet, but I feel like it's just a matter of time. Then we got the Red King from Planet Hulk, another one that I thought would have eventually made it to store shelves by now, but the further away we get from the Planet Hulk story, the more I think we might never see this dude. What's even more of a shame is that while Beast reused a lot of Hulk parts, the Red King was 100% new, original sculpt. So they went to a lot of effort to put him together, and then that was it. Then we got Lady Bullseye, which was a real up-to-date character for them to have and include. So it was great that they were going for real modern characters, but they decided maybe that was a bit too up-to-date because they would shelve her for a little while and then, gosh, almost 15, 20 years later, we would eventually get a new version of her in the Mindless One wave. Then there's Jamie Madrox, the Multiple Man, and we have had multiple men after this. Well, 2, but none of them have had this exact look for the character. So even though we've got plenty of multiple men, we still don't have this one. Brother Voodoo. Okay, this is the OG Brother Voodoo, who I think looks a bit more gnarly and a bit more kind of mysterious than what we eventually got. We've had 2 Brother Voodoos since this one was revealed, but this particular look, we never got him. The bombastic Bagman. I'm surprised that they even had this figure as a concept way back in the day. I thought you would have had to have waited a couple of decades before you start scraping the barrel for some of these alternate costumes. But no, Hasbro were toying with the concept as early as 2009. And eventually, when we did get the retro carded Bagman, I got to admit, I actually think they did a really good job with him. Dark Miss Marvel. It took a while to get another version of this character, and even then, they are not absolutely identical to each other. It's not exactly the same design, but it's pretty darn close, and it's nice that she finally made it to store shelves. Nuke. I tell you what, a little deep-cut hidden gem of a Marvel legend is the Hasbro Nuke figure. 2 different heads, the removable jacket, the big old gun, the combat knife. Really great stuff. But before we got that, we had this concept version. Not even a concept, a fully realized action figure. But he got put on hold for quite a while. But when they did finally make him, you know what? I'd say it was quite an improvement. Then we got a character that we've actually still never had in Marvel Legends form. And please do stop me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty certain that is the case. And that's Terra Inc. At first, when I saw him, I thought, how did Black Mask end up in here? But no, it's Terra Inc. And right now, he's still waiting to get his moment in the sun. Who knows? Maybe one day. Then there's Havoc, once again in his early 2000s comic book type form. Another character that we still don't have this particular look of. We've had a few nice Havocs over the years. We got the X Factor one. We got the classic OG sort of look with the swirly head mask costume. You know what I'm talking about. But this early 2000s look, it seems like the fans haven't been demanding it enough. And honestly, I'm kind of okay with that. Phantom X. We didn't get this version they had on display, but we did eventually get the character in the Nimrod 3-pack. That was the one, wasn't it? The X-Force style Phantom X. I'm wondering, did we also get an earlier version of him? I'm going to have to double check that. But Nimrod 3-pack, we definitely got that. I know, because I owned it. I didn't imagine it. Did I? X-Force Wolverine. This is one of those Wolverine figures that was inevitable as Thanos, because it's such an easy repaint. So even though they didn't move forward with him in 2009, it didn't take them long. Oh, what could have been? We had the hood, an early version of the hood. Man, this already looks better than the one we finally got. I love that the face actually looks kind of gaunt and shadowy and like he's being twisted by dark magic, as opposed to the one that we actually got, which is just... Still don't know what's up with that. This original version of the hood looked so much cooler. Then we got Constrictor, who now, in 2026, we got 2 different versions of. The one that's just been revealed was on the leak list for years, literally years, and people were asking, when are we going to get this dude? And I was like, eventually. Trust me, it is going to happen. Now it has in the Secret Wars wave, but back in 2009, clearly people were already asking for him. Then Black Widow had a different head and torso piece when she eventually made it to retail. Similarly, the Warpath that we got had a different head and also a different torso piece as opposed to the one that was originally shown. I mean, what were we even voting on? I mean, come on, I'm calling corruption here. That is not what I paid my phone bill for, is what I would have said at the time, had I have voted or cared. Also, Deadpool ended up using the same body, but different head, feet, and various other parts, which makes sense for Wade Wilson, always getting things chopped off and regrowing them. Also, if you think you recognize some of the bodies that these characters were on, well, you were right. because Lady Bullseye, Black Widow, Dark Miss Marvel, and White Phoenix were all just put on the usual basic female body that they had at the time. But then Multiple Man, The Hood, and Terra Inc. were going to be using the ultimate Nick Fury body with the long trench coat. Bagman used the Toy Biz Mr. Fantastic body, and Phantom X, Deadpool, Constrictor, and Havoc were all using the Toy Biz Bullseye body. Then there's Nuke and Warpath. They were both using the bigger Toy Biz Hulkling body. Wolverine used the Toy Biz Series 6 Wolverine body. And Dr. Voodoo appears to be using the Toy Biz Face-Off Punisher body with a lot of overlays and bare feet and probably a few things that were reused from other characters. We've got White Phoenix over here, who still has not had an up-to-date Marvel Legend. We've had Dark Phoenix, we've had Green Phoenix, but we're still holding out for the white and gold version. And I can't help but think it's got to be inevitable, but it hasn't happened yet. Now, this is a big one. We have an entire wave of action figures for a whole individual franchise that never made it to production. It's the animated versions of these characters from the cartoon Fantastic Four: World's Greatest Heroes, which as a TV show, I guess, never got enough of a fan following to warrant putting these into production. And that's a real shame because some of these designs are really cool, mostly the huge big Moloid Build-A-Figure monster. That would have been so great because that would have gone with any modern Marvel Legends. That thing still would have looked the business. And then just having these animated versions of the characters, yeah, they wouldn't go with anything else. But some of the designs I thought were genuinely really rather fun, especially the Skrull, who looks really like OG, slightly goofy, wacky, grotesque-looking comic book Skrull from like their first appearance. I thought this dude you totally could include with modern Marvel Legends, and yeah, he'd look a bit wonky, but also just kind of adorable. Now, this is one that's a real heartbreaker because it looks so cool, and as you can see from the photos, we were close to getting it by the looks of things. We've got the orange Fang Foom with lovely soft good pants as well. He was going to be part of the Marvel Universe line, which was the smaller characters, and we got some big, really impressive figures from this line. This was the line that gave us the Marvel Universe Galactus, who before the Build-A-Figure came out was arguably the best one. You could stack him up next to the Toy Biz Build-A-Figure and take your pick, but certainly he was very impressive. Similarly, there was a Marvel Universe Sentinel as well, so we had some big, impressive characters in that line, and Fang Foom was going to be next. It was going to be the Build-A-Figure version, but with a different head and possibly some sound effects as well that were going to be put in there with a little sound chip. You know what? It would have been great, but it never happened. But it was so close. But hey, it's one of those ones that now Hasbro can look at and go, you know what? Orange Fang Foom? It's not a bad idea, that. Especially because knowing Hasbro, they would make the orange one, get us all to buy it, and then give us the green one. And I for one, would do that because I'm a sucker. Also, at a convention, it looks as though Hasbro might have been hinting towards the idea of a Devil Dinosaur, again, for their 3.75-inch Marvel Universe line. What this actually is, though, is just a repainted Tyrannosaurus Rex from their Jurassic Park 3 line. Because at the time, Hasbro had the Jurassic Park license. So this was probably just mocked up for the display. But certainly, we know that Hasbro loved to do that, giving us little hints of stuff that we might get, kind of hiding in plain sight. This one was a hint that we didn't get. But still, it's fun to see Devil Dinosaur, or at least something that looks like him. Now, even though it was Toy Biz who gave us lots of chase figures and different versions of characters you had to hunt down, Hasbro were tempted to do this as well, because at either the 2012 or 2013 San Diego Comic-Cons, we saw at least a render of an upcoming Hawkeye Ultimate version. It was speculated that this was designed to be a chase version of the Hawkeye figure who would eventually come out in the Rocket Racoon wave. Speaking Speaking of the Rocket Racoon wave, there are a couple of cancelled or delayed characters that were originally supposed to come out with everyone else. So classic Hawkeye, he was originally scheduled to be in the Rocket Racoon Build-A-Figure line, but he was actually held back for 2 years, and it wouldn't be until the Odin Build-A-Figure that we'd finally get him. Also, Bulldozer originally first appeared in this Rocket Racoon wave, and when he was pulled, fans were understandably a little bit worried that they wouldn't get the chance to finish their Wrecking Crew. Luckily though, he did eventually make it to toy store shelves. Toy store shelves? Very, very Sean Connery. He eventually made it to toy store shelves as part of the Ant-Man wave. And finally for that wave, there is once again white costume Jean Grey Phoenix, making this the only figure that has been presented and cancelled twice. That's quite a record. There's also in this line Age of Apocalypse Jean Grey, who was similarly cancelled. We did get Age of Apocalypse Jean Grey eventually, way down the line with their AOA wave. But white costume Phoenix, twice revealed, twice cancelled, and still not on anyone's shelf. Next up, there's the Hit Monkey wave, and man, some of these characters are dropping like flies, okay? So there's a ton that were originally shown, but we never actually got. So first of all, there's Lyra. Is that how you pronounce her name? I always just said Lyra. Let me know if you can break it down phonetically in the comments for me. And even though Lyra was just going to be a simple repaint of the Red She-Hulk, we never got her. And to this day, much like white costume Jean Grey, we're still waiting. Then after her, there's X-Force Archangel, who of course we would eventually get. First of all in an X-Force box set, and then really recently, just like a month or two ago, he hit store shelves as a deluxe figure. Then there's White Iron Fist, who we did eventually get on a bit of an outdated, skinny-looking body. Really don't like that one, but hey, at least they followed through with them. Also, Iron Fist was supposed to be a variant, maybe a chase version of the Protector figure. So they're essentially the same mechanics of action figure with different paint jobs. But Iron Fist, yeah, he got his own dedicated release a little bit later. Then there's Sentry as well, who was cancelled from the wave, but not from eventually being released. I think it might have been the Odin wave he came in, but I'll have to double check that. Anyway, we did ultimately get that version of the Sentry, just had to wait a little bit longer for him. The next Build-A-Figure for 2013 was supposed to be Jubilee, but the entire wave got scrapped, and Jubilee was then moved on to 2014 with a different bunch of characters to make up her Build-A-Figure. Moonstone from the Thunderbolts box set was supposed to get her own individual carded figure, but that never happened. She did eventually get her own individual release though, but that wasn't until a different version in 2022. Agent Venom would eventually see the light of day, not as part of a wave though, but for his own individual Walgreens exclusive. For fans of B-list villains everywhere, you could breathe a sigh of relief because Tiger Shark did get his moment in the sun as part of the Ant-Man Build-A-Figure wave of 2015. 2015 also saw the release of Blizzard, although he had a little bit of a downgrade. Being released in the Hulkbuster wave, he still had his fists, but gone from the package were his grippy hands. No gripping for this guy. One of my favorite deep cut Marvel Legends, Radioactive Man, eventually was put out in a 3-pack in 2015. Also, fun note, unless you can tell me otherwise, I'm pretty sure Radioactive Man, the only Marvel Legend with a glow-in-the-dark gimmick. And as for Songbird, this version of her with the slightly punkier, spiky-looking haircut from later versions of the Thunderbolts never saw the light of day. Eventually, in 2019, we got a whole new version of Songbird based more on her classic Thunderbolts appearance, which honestly, I really wish they'd do a new version of. 2013 also marked a very dubious first. You know what it was? It was the first Marvel Legends wave with no Build-A-Figure. It was the Epic Heroes wave, which started a trend that we are still seeing today. Pour one out for regular Build-A-Figures. So we all know about the Punisher from this wave, who had a really cool red Thunderbolts repaint. That was a nice little chase version of the character, but you know what? There was going to be a third one as well. We were going to get Blade for this wave as well, who would have similarly been a repaint and obviously a head sculpt rejig of that Punisher. But you know what? Despite how cool he looks, we never got him. And down the line, of course, we would get different Blade figures, but none that quite have this particular version of the character. And it's one that, honestly, I'd really love to see. Kind of interestingly, this white version of Doctor Doom, which isn't God Emperor Doom, this is Future Foundation style Doom. At least that's what I understand from what I've read. This one was cancelled in America, but was incredibly abundant over in Europe. So even though he's technically hard to find in America, he's not sort of super sought after as being amazingly rare, because over in the EU, well, we're tripping over him. We got too many Future Foundation Dooms. Don't know what to do with them. Also, X-Force Deadpool had a red variant as well, which, just like Doctor Doom, super abundant in Europe, but you couldn't really get over in America. That wasn't a big problem though, because that red version of Deadpool was just a re-release of one that had come out very close to that time in a 2-pack with Warpath. The Moonstar figure was going to be a simple repaint of Mystique, although that one was straight up cancelled, not even any secret supplies in Europe, and we eventually got another version of the character in 2019. Staying in 2013, but going on over to the MCU, we have a few Iron Man movie figures that never made it to toy shelves. First of all, we have Gwyneth Paltrow's Pepper Potts in her rescue armor. This rescue figure, however, would eventually be released as a Marvel Unlimited exclusive for subscribers of the app, but she would come without the Pepper Potts head, just the regular helmet. Then we have Trevor Slattery as the Mandarin, a character who was massively hated at the time. And honestly, I get it. I wasn't a huge Mandarin fan, but if I was, that would have been quite a bait and switch that I wouldn't have liked. Trevor Slattery eventually got his starring moment in the spotlight as part of the MCU 10-year anniversary wave. And then also we get a War Machine. Or we didn't get a War Machine. But in the years that would follow, we got plenty of War Machines. And then this version of War Machine was eventually put out in the 2015 Hulkbuster wave. Last couple for 2013 now. First of all, Phoenix Force Cyclops, a figure that did actually get made, and apparently a couple did pop up in Asia. I mean, they must have, because we have photos of them. So it does exist, but only in the teeniest, tiniest numbers. Although on a recent Marvel Legends leak list, they did have Phoenix Force Cyclops. So it is likely that over the next year or two, we will see a new version of him. Then we got Rogue, who was supposed to be a variant of the Emma Frost from that wave. Now this one, similar to the Phoenix Force Cyclops, she did make it out in Europe. Only a couple of figures though. I don't know how much they go for, if you can even find any these days. But we did get another version of this costume released in 2020 as part of a 2-pack, although this version was a little bit more modest. That zip, that went up a little bit higher. Now we're going to jump way forward in time to 2020 and San Diego Comic-Con, where Hasbro had some unusual faces in their Marvel Legends diorama display, and these guys probably were never destined to actually be put into production, but were maybe just little custom pieces thrown in there to get gums a-flapping. And now, 6 years later, my gums, they are a-flapping. First of all, we had some fun AIM representation. There was quite a cool looking AIM Mandroid in the display. And also backing him up, there was an AIM Gamma Monster. And considering that recently we've had a whole bunch of love shown to our 90s Incredible Hulk characters, I feel like we might get a Gamma Monster at some point. Then finally, there was a figure that was never going to be made, but man, it would have been kind of fun if it was, and that was Macho Deadpool. Yeah, gonna make an action figure, gonna put him on a shelf, sell him to everybody, yeah. Or not, as the case may be. It was a fun idea though. Another character who was subtly on display at this particular Comic-Con was Overdrive, who seemed to be made up of just a repainted Star-Lord body with a new head. And it's real funny that we don't have this character yet, because he's a classic member of the superior foes of Spider-Man. I know that's about as D-list as any supervillain team can get. I mean, that is the point. But we have all the other members of that roster. So it's genuinely surprising that we don't have some new version of Overdrive or any version of Overdrive, just so that Hasbro can say, hey, look, that's another team we finally completed. I feel like it's inevitable. It's going to happen one day, but as of today, we're still waiting. Another little concept that Hasbro was playing around with was doing Build-A-Figure parts for multi-packs. So there was going to be a couple of MCU 2-packs that would have the Build-A-Figure pieces for what would eventually be the 80th anniversary Stan Lee figure. So it looks like what we see here in the prototype was what we got in the single release. And honestly, for Stan Lee, he deserves a single release. You don't want to be distributing this in a Build-A-Figure set. Nah, the dude deserves his own showcase spotlight. And that's eventually what he got. We have another fan vote now. Unfortunately, there were no mock-ups made for the characters. They just showed comic book pictures. But the interesting thing here is that once again, Terra Inc. had his chance to get the votes, but people didn't go for him. And also, this is the first time we see any hint of a potential Solo figure. Solo, another deep-cut, street-level vigilante that we still haven't seen in, I don't think, any kind of action figure form. Not Toy Biz, Mattel, Hasbro, you name it. I don't think there's ever been a Solo. Yet. And then finally, 2020 gave us another fan vote. This time for 3 ladies. There was Silk, there was Lady Sif, and White Costume Elektra. Eventually, it would be Silk who won the fan vote, and we got a very nice action figure out of that. Then later, we'd get White Costume Elektra in the Daredevil 3-pack. And as for Lady Sif, well, we're still waiting for her. There was a Lady Sif figure that came out, I think. Was she part of the A-Force box set? I'll double check that. But that figure came out a long time before this fan vote, so we would have potentially got a brand new one. But now, 6 years later, still waiting for an up-to-date Lady Sif. Who knows? One of these days, maybe it'll happen. And that does it for the comprehensive list of every Marvel Legend that was altered, designed, changed, or outright cancelled. Thank you so much, friend of the show, Joey B, for putting this list and all this information together for me. You're an absolute superstar. And gang, what do you think is the most disappointing change, alteration, or cancellation? What figure would you have loved to have seen that never made it to toy store shelves? Comment below and let me know. And gang, if you enjoyed this video, a little thumbs up would go a heck of a long way. Thank you so much for your support. And until next time, keep displaying model behavior.